and we are not in the city chambers. As you can tell, there was a trial going on and they were still debating, so that's why we're here. And the mayor is in Vermont, so you're stuck with me tonight. Be kind. So this is time for public comment on any items. You're free to talk about anything you want, up to 3 minutes. Please give us your name and address. If you'd like to, come up to the podium and say whatever you'd like to say. Or you can wait and talk about the two agendas which are on the table over there. Anybody?
I'm pretty loud. So.
Okay.
I may not even need this. Okay. Amber Dunn, Dorothy Lane. First, I'd like to start by saying I appreciate that Denise Bowman posted my email on the thread, but at the same time, I feel as though my Freedom of Information Act was violated, since now the public cannot see what I was posting. You could have easily edited that picture so that certain parts wouldn't have been seen. Anyways, so I'm going to go over my email just to make sure that everyone got it. Thongs pulled down. Kids should not be forced to see this. Ridiculous. Hello. I'm sure the picture attached isn't something that you wanted to see. We didn't want to see it either. My child and I saw this Friday at 5:43 p.m. Families are grabbing dinner at Jersey Mike's. I am appalled at the fact that our city just sits back and allows this crap to continue. This woman has her thongs pulled down with you-know-what all over her, showing all the city her glory, and laying next to her man on the ground. This is behind the Jersey Mike's in the Heights. They made themselves a place for the night, a little corner of the parking lot. What a sweet little not home for the night. I'm being sarcastic. I do not believe any citizen in the city of Billings is okay with this crap. You cannot show me one person that thinks this is okay. These people who refuse to get a job and be contributing members of society are now taking over the skate park, other parks, and parking lots. What is going on here? We have seen a man right next to the police station lay down, pee on himself, and then stay there in his urine and sleep. Why are we allowing this right outside of City Hall? We should have a field trip for all the schools to ride downtown to see what the homeless and drugs do to you. It should be our PSA for not doing drugs and how not to be a menace on society. Remember, the old one, the egg, this is your brain on drugs? Why are we allowing this to continue in our city? Yeah, I gave you a letter from Flathead County that talks about the same things that are going on here. The commissioners asked the city to stop giving money to the homeless because it was destroying the county. You didn't even acknowledge it. Do you really care about your city? Because right now it looks as though you only care about us working, non-homeless people to get our tax dollars, not to help us, but to take from us. Then the homeless can benefit from our taxes. How is this right? You want more money from us? Do your jobs and clean up the city, and then maybe you can get some more tax dollars. This isn't California. It can be if you do not do your jobs and clean up this city. I hope and pray that the ones of you that are up for re-election get replaced, because you are not helping us as a community or our community. None of you are. Shame on all of you. Since other cities send their trash to Billings, take the trash out yourself, City Council, and tell everyone that the homeless are not welcome here. Oh, wait. Everyone is welcome here, says Mr. Mayor. So I guess you enjoy seeing your city turn to crap. It's the wrong way of thinking. I guess you're also okay with seeing pedophiles, murderers, and all other forms of drugged out trash coming to Billings. I wish I would have known before I voted for you. If anybody liked the video or the picture, please email me or reach out to me on Facebook. Absolutely ridiculous. Just take stuff away from people to see.
I'm going to swing this one from the hip tonight. Wesley Dunn, 832 Dorothy Lane. I am going to talk about marijuana and marijuana taxes, but first, ditto to what she said. But I only have 3 minutes. So, right now as it is, the marijuana taxes is 23% on anything you purchase cannabis-wise. Alright, so 20% of that is going to the state. And the other 3% is going to each county that allowed that to be sold within their county. So that means Billings is getting a certain portion of that 3%. Laurel is getting a certain portion of that percent, and Broadview is getting the other portion. Okay, so all in all, the city did not use that in the past as part of their budget. So it is free money for the city. So what I suggest, union members only. What happens with union members when they get a raise, say it's 3%. Every year they negotiate that with their union, say it Local 190, whatever it might be. Fire, police, public works, all the way across the board, they have a union that represents them. So when they get a raise, say it's 3% or whatever, their union dues go up every time. So how is that helping any working man or woman out there trying to get ahead in life? So basically the union's just taking it right away from you. Alright, so with that being said, give it to the union workers only. I don't care how y'all want to look at it and how you want to figure it out, but divvy it out in a portion. Insurance rates are going up so much within the city of Billings. Their employees are having to pay a lot of money. All the time the insurance rates goes up. So what does this do? It helps compensate all that is basically taken away from the man or woman that's trying to get ahead in today's economic times. Doing something like this shows your hardworking union employees that you care in these hard economic times. So just think about that. This is free money to the Billings, to the city of Billings. Why not give it back to your hardworking employees? You did not have it in your budget before. It's free money. The more people buy marijuana and spend money on marijuana, the more the city of Billings is getting. So like I said, I don't care how you do it, how you budget it out, but give it back to your union workers only. Only your union workers. Because non-union workers, city members get bonuses in other places. Okay? That's a fact. That's about it. So anyways, something to think about. Okay? Remember, that's free money. And I know y'all have already talked about it in your budget, This is from here on out. So anybody that's looking, watching, and everybody talks, other things walk. So let's just give them something to talk about. Thank you.
Anyone else? Is there anything on the internet there, Kevin? Well, we'll close public comment. Just as a note, this is an informal meeting. We cannot make any formal direction of anything other than to direct staff to assist us in one direction or not. So with that, let's go to number 1, HRDC housing presentation. Keaton, I guess, I got that right? Are you up tonight? And Cody?
Yep.
So we have a microphone if you'd like to come up and talk. Or you want it said here?
Okay. Yeah, I guess I'll just start. My name's Keaton Frost. I'm the Marketing and PR Specialist for HRDC District 7. And then we have Cody Christensen here, who is our Community Mobilization Manager. We're just kind of here to talk about the services we offer at HRDC. If you're unfamiliar, HRDC stands for Human Resources Development Council. There are 11 HRDCs across Montana. We're District 7. We are a community action agency, which is a nationwide effort to help address poverty. They cover about 99% of the U.S., and all of them are trying to help impoverished people help reach self-sufficiency and economic independence. We serve Carbon, Sweetgrass, Yellowstone, Stillwater, and Bighorn counties, so 5 counties that we serve. And our mission statement is to empower people in need through mobilizing and developing community resources by creating opportunities for success in the 5 counties that we serve. And I did want to just disclose that the programming that we're discussing is not all-encompassing. We do a lot for the community, but this is kind of just the things that are most requested. And we're going to start with emergency services first, because that's the most busiest and highly requested department.
So I'll jump in here. We're gonna start with our Emergency Solutions Grant, or our ESG grant. All of our world loves an acronym, so it's ESG, you'll hear a lot of. But 2 of our programs that we utilize out of that grant funding, one would be our rapid rehousing, which also helps clients find a stable place to live. So with that though, we do have some stipulations on it based on the grant, obviously, just like any other grant. Some of them are that they must be living in unlivable habitat, so like an abandoned building or a car or something along those lines. They cannot be living with friends or family members, so no couch surfing. And if they're living in a homeless shelter, they can get verification from that shelter. But again, they have to be staying in a shelter. Another one that we offer is our homeless prevention program. It helps the people that are at risk of being homeless, so kind of jumping and being more preventive. They must have an eviction notice to qualify for the service, or they must be living in with an annual income 30% below the average area median. So those are two of our busy programs out of that grant.
And then we have our general assistance program. That's offered to people who don't have dependents and they're waiting on supplemental security income or social security. There's disability income. There's a lot of acronyms. But basically, we're trying to help them with rent and utility payments. They must be resident of Yellowstone County for at least 90 days, and they must be on some sort of food benefits, so most likely SNAP. And for each of these programs, we kind of take a housing assessment with them so we can kind of understand where they're at and go from there. With that, we also have our Family Forward program, which is kind of similar. It's more of an umbrella of each department that we have. So we help clients who are facing several barriers. Instead of addressing one at a time, we address them all at once. And we measure these kind of life goals that they have through 16 meaningful life domains. Some of them being housing, financial literacy, education, childcare, things like that. Our coordinator kind of works with local organizations to kind of work with the client in all the way, like in every aspect that they need. After each goal is achieved, the case manager and client come together and kind of reassess where they're at to reprioritize what goal they want to meet next.
I'm gonna jump in again. We don't have a slide for this one, so you can just focus on me. No. So one thing that we want to talk about, another resource we have is our home center, and I know that you've probably seen it driving by going down First Avenue. They offer a couple programs there, but we have HUD certified housing counselors there that work directly with the clients and prepare them for the home buying process. So it's kind of an in-depth program. They can create a budget to follow, help you understand mortgage options. They also do free pre-purchase counseling as well, so that's really cool. The Housing Center also has Money Foundation workshops to help them understand different financial topics. They'll help you teach on how to improve your credit score, save money more efficiently, and there's also no standards for that program either. So any of us could go in and do it. They don't have to be low income or anything. It's just a resource to the community.
And so for teenagers and young adults who are unhoused, we have a few resources for them as well. Our Harmony House is our on-campus transitional living program. So for parents that are pregnant or parenting, they can stay at this house, which is right on our campus. And while they're staying there, they have to put in time to kind of reach self-sufficiency. So while they're there, they do life skills trainings, they take parental skills classes, financial literacy classes, things like that. And then on top of that, they also are trying to find a place for their families to live. We also have Transition in Place, which is similar to Harmony House. The only difference is that it's off campus. And then we also have our Youth Homeless Demonstration Project, which is also offered to teenagers and young adults from ages 14 to 24. Our case managers kind of help them with multiple things, which is also a bundled service we have here. So on top of trying to find a place to live, they are also working on gaining an education. Typically their HiSET, or formerly known as their GED. They're meeting with our alternative education instructor for personalized tutoring classes to help them gain that HiSET. They're also working on gaining employment skills with our youth and employment work sites. I guess kind of with that, one of our biggest departments we have right now is our childcare department. And they are the childcare resource and referral agency for 14 counties, which is here, and they're listed right here. So on top of providing providers with, we kind of help them with, we help them become licensed. And we also have services offered to families as well. So if we have families that are looking for childcare, we have our referral services, so they can fill out a childcare needs form and meet with our referral specialist to kind of help them find a childcare program that works with their needs and their goals. We also have our Best Beginning scholarships, which if you're familiar with it, it helps kind of reduce childcare costs for families who need it. We also, there's been a few changes in the past month or so, and now those families are now eligible for more. So more families are eligible for the scholarship, and co-payments are now capped at 9%, so it's a little more affordable for them.
So another program that we offer is our LEAP program, which helps households pay a portion of their utility bill. And another one would be our Wheels to Work program that is a partnership with United Way of Yellowstone County. It helps eliminate transportation barriers for our applicants. So by providing them bus passes, gas cards, or access to minor car repairs up to $800. So there's an option to help them keep a job, so that's really cool. And then also stated at the beginning of the presentation, this does not cover all the things that we do to help others we serve in the community, but we also have roughly 24 core programs in our district funded by over 50 grants and contract sources to make the programs possible. So it's not something that we just focus on one source of income, it's just something that we see where we can get funding because we see these programs as a need in our community.
We've been a part of the community for 50 years and we hope to keep that number growing. We do have a lot more information on our website for all of the programs and departments that we have. We've also included our emails if any of you wanted more information about anything else that we do. You can also follow us on Facebook and Instagram. We have a lot of updates going on there as well.
Keaton does a really good job about our social media, so
I do try.
definitely follow those.
And then we also have our LinkedIn account too, which you can also use as well. And then you can also give us a call. And I have my business cards here if you wanted any more information on anything else too.
And if you're ever interested in like touring any of these programs or coming down to the office, definitely reach out to us. We'd be happy to show you.
That's everything. So,
That's it.
Would you be able to send that presentation to the council?
Absolutely.
So anybody have any questions on the council? Councilman?
I had a question. Thank you for the presentation. It's very nice. I just had a question about, in terms of capacity, I mean, you have a lot of different programs and each one is segmented by maybe you need 30% of the median income. Some of them are kind of open to everyone. But there's a whole range of different services you're providing. But where are you in terms of being able to meet the need that's out there? So I'd like you to speak a little bit about what's the need and how are we meeting that need? Where are we at with that situation?
So one thing that we do as an agency is complete a community needs assessment. With that assessment, we can gauge obviously the needs of the community. So that's also something that when we see those answers come back, we can say, okay, are our programs meeting that need? These change all the time. So we always are printing out new program guides because we're saying this one's not needed anymore, but now this one is. So we're creating new ones all the time. And with that, we also look at different funding sources. Some of those stipulations that we were talking about are based on those funding sources, and that would be like where that 30% median income comes into play. And sometimes we say, well, that doesn't fill this need, then we're going to try to find a different funding source. So that's kind of how that role works, I guess. But the community needs assessment is something that we do. We're looking at partnerships. We know that Riverstone Health just completed one, so we've been looking at theirs. Different agencies complete different community assessments kind of along the same lines. So we're really good about not working in a silo. We try to see what other agencies are doing, what we can do to assist with them if they're already completing that need. But again, it comes also back to that funding source on what we are allowed to do.
Councilman Tiswell?
I'm sure there are many, but what are your two biggest challenges right now?
Definitely housing. It's been really hard to try to find people a stable place to live. And that's all that's really coming to mind. And I guess, no, really, that's the only thing
That's your
that
primary
that's our
task.
biggest.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Councilman Shaw.
So I have a question for you. Thank you. I really appreciate learning all of the breadth of what you guys do. I know lots of people in the community are aware of housing issues. How would people go about getting involved or supporting the work that's already happening? Do you need volunteers? Do you take volunteers? Can people donate money directly to HRDC? How can our community support you in the work that's already existing?
Yeah, we take donations for sure. That's something that we've had in the past. We've had businesses donate money around the holidays especially. But as far as working with us, just give us a call, see what we need. I don't know if we don't generally use volunteers, but
At least not right now,
Yeah.
but we're always accepting them, so.
Councilman Dees.
Thank you. Just real quick about you mentioned that 30% of the average median income of Yellowstone County. What's the amount that you're helping with?
I'm not sure. I don't know the number right now offhand, but we can email that to you for sure.
Okay, so
Councilman Gulick.
So HRDC would be a member of the COC, the Continuum of Care in town, and follow-up question, I guess. And I know you're just listing, I mean, you have a lot of programs, but you weren't listing all of them even. Is there still a program for assisting people with improving the efficiency of their houses and insulation and okay.
Or weatherization program. Yeah.
Weatherization program, yeah. Is there something that we as a city could be doing better or in better coordination with HRDC that comes to mind?
I think just
Yeah.
knowing what programs we offer, giving us a call if you have any questions. If you see a need in the community, reach out. That's something that we might be able to step in and help with that role as well. So just that open line of communication.
Councilman Brooks.
Every time we hear about what HRCDC does, it's 24 programs, and it's like, how do referrals come into you? If somebody just walks in off the street, how do they navigate all that mess? How do you find the right programs for them? And with so much out there with overlapping, it just seems confusing. Yeah, so how do people find the right resources?
A lot of times they're referred to us by usually OPA, Office of Public Assistance, or I know we do get walk-ins and we do try to help them as best as we can. But I know at least for emergency services that we don't really accept walk-ins because there's already such a big need for people that need housing. So I guess, yeah, when they come in first floor, we kind of gauge what they need and go from there.
They're mostly referred into you then from other
Usually.
agencies.
Yes, sir.
So I'm sure you're aware about the whole study that's going on with Family Justice Center Alliance. I always get those two words mixed up. Do you guys, does HRDC seeing itself as playing a role in that place? Is that?
Yeah, so one thing that we do, we work very closely with like United Way of Yellowstone County. So we work a lot with the DV clients and making sure that they're referred to the proper areas. We can help them out wherever we're able to. But the Family Justice Center, we've had presentations from them, and it's definitely something that we support and see as a need in the community.
Go ahead.
Another one. Can you talk to me a little bit about the situation with childcare in Billings right now? Is that an area you address, or?
Yeah, definitely. We have our whole department for it, and we do have a outreach and communication specialist that really is well versed in all that we do for childcare, both providers and family services. So I can definitely get you that information if you need it.
So I guess part of what's going on in my head about that is I've heard that we've lost a number of providers recently. So is that becoming a problem?
Not to my knowledge. I haven't heard anything about it, but I don't really work in that department, so it could be different.
We do have, we have that knowledge that a lot of providers closed their doors around the COVID times, and majority of them did not come back. So we know that there's been a growing need of childcare in the community. Our department works very closely with all of them, trying to see who can get in where. I know that there's wait lists involved and everything, so it is definitely still a need. But we have funding available for it, but obviously we can't just open another childcare center either.
Okay, so the funding is reimbursement for. Thanks.
Any other questions, Councilman Joy?
Thank you. Yeah, and speaking about the housing, the need for housing, you know, 1/3 of our median income is not very much. It isn't going to even rent you anything that I know of in the city. So how many people are being housed in hotels because there's nowhere else for them to be?
So we don't have funding for hotel vouchers currently. We have utilized that in the past for emergency reasons, obviously, but currently we're not housing anybody in hotels.
So where do they get housed?
So if we have available rentals, we work very close with the home front, Section 8, all of that. We have kind of a very similar department, and they work together all day, every day. So it's that growing wait list of trying to find available rentals that are affordable or Section 8 approved in our community.
Thank you.
Councilman Neese?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. You mentioned your wait list. How long is your wait list, and how often do you update it, purge off, older names
For what department?
for housing?
For housing?
Yeah.
I'm not sure on how long the Section 8 is currently. Do you?
I'm actually, and I don't know, but I know we do not, I know we have, we oversee the rural Section 8 program, so we don't include the city of Billings, but I can definitely get that information for you as well.
That'd be great, thank you.
And I had a question that during the course of a year, how many people do you help, do you service during a year?
The annual report? No, but I know it's, I think it's roughly 16,000.
16,000?
Yeah. And we just
For-
finished our
for
annual
all
report
programs, too.
for
Yeah.
all of them.
That's not just Yellowstone County, correct?
That's all. Yeah,
All
all
the
our
grants,
5
everybody's,
counties.
okay, thank you.
Councilman Repsis, did you?
Yeah, I guess I'm just kind of going back to the housing, and you were talking about Homefront. Is that an overlap? Are the services complementary, or
So we
you're not
work.
competing? but-
No, we're not competing. So since we have a housing authority in Billings, they handle all the Section 8. We just we partner with them and see where we can help out. But we do the Section 8 for the remaining 4 counties. So we don't oversee Yellowstone County for
Okay.
that portion.
That makes sense. Okay. Any other questions? Okay. Well, let's open it up for public comment. Anyone in the public like to make a comment about this presentation?
Yes,
Sir,
I'm James and,
Sir, if you could step up to the podium here.
okay, I'm not used to talking to Mike, but I used to work at Stillwater Mine, and I got divorced a little while ago, and now I'm homeless, but I keep falling through the cracks. They say I make too much money because of my disability. I got hit in the head with a pipe wrench. I have a traumatic brain injury, okay? So I make too much money, and I can't get benefits, okay? So I'm not stupid, okay? That's why I'm in your meeting, okay? I just want to let you all know that I would like to be a part of making a difference, okay? With that all said, I'm kind of losing this. So thank you.
Thank you for
I'll
coming.
be listening, okay? I just want to be part of.
So Cody, maybe afterwards. Okay. Any questions, anyone else? Okay. Then we'll close number 1. How's that? Thank you very much. And if you could
Excuse
send
me.
us the presentation, that would be nice.
Excuse me,
Yes,
if you don't mind, just Cody, that's a really good question because you have those limits and stuff. And so when you get someone who really doesn't fit, they're falling through the cracks, what type of referral, what type of options do they have?
So it depends on the type of referral. I would say for a similar situation, we would look at what other programs are available in the community, what programs we offer that they would fit in that category. Because with some of those grants, there are those stipulations like we talked about. So it really depends on the individual. So I'm not sure on a specific.
Okay, so it's
but
case by case
Yeah,
that
it
they,
is,
you have
absolutely.
to actually see what they're, okay, and so you work with a lot of different organizations that have an option to refer them to. Okay.
So if we wouldn't just tell a client that no, we can't help them, we would make sure they're referred to an agency that can.
Okay, great, thank you.
So you'll be able to visit with this gentleman afterwards. Okay. Thank you very much for coming.
Thank you for having us. We appreciate it. And I'll send you that information as well.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
So, Council, we're trying this very informal, process tonight, and so, I'd certainly like to be back after this, when we're looking at the new city hall, what can we do better, what can, make this, informal process of like you want, even table layout, anything like that. So we think of that as we're kind of, going through this tonight, since we're gonna try
drive very often before so. Yeah, thank you.
Thanks, guys.
That's good.
Popcorn, Mr. Reese and Mike.
Thank you, that's good.
Yes, I was not to talk to you, but thank you.
Okay, number 2. Kevin, you got some presentation. We have Wyeth Friday here today. Thank you, Wyeth, for showing up.
Yeah,
No one else
absolutely.
did. Everybody else is gone.
Wouldn't miss it.
What are we trying to annex?
So, yeah, I'll start off here. Monica and I are gonna take turns on part of the presentation. But this is a follow-up. So on July 10th, we had this on your regular agenda for several action items regarding the annexation map and then the policy. At that meeting, the council decided to delay several of the items, put it on a work session, which is where we are tonight, but you did act on one amendment to the map regarding the Central Avenue corridor. So that was completed, and that resolution was passed. So what we're here tonight to do is walk through the other elements that you didn't take action on, and then anticipating that we'll be coming back at your next meeting for regular action for those items. So basically, faster than there we go. So there's two kind of components here we're going to talk through tonight. Obviously, you're not acting on them tonight, but the first one is looking at amendments to the current limits of annexation map with 2 property requests that were submitted last fall, and the annexation committee has been reviewing and discussing with the requesters and city staff. And then the second piece is the proposed some amendments to the annexation policy to really help address how the map is depicted, and looking at areas that are available for annexation versus some areas that are developed in the county but have continued to be within the map area, and we'll talk about that. But those are really the kind of the areas of focus tonight. So, and that's what would be coming back to you for action at your next meeting. So just real briefly again, in terms of the process, we have our annexation policy and map. We review it annually in alignment with the city's CIP process. So when the city's updating the CIP in the fall, we then start reviewing our annexation map and policy, and as that's going forward to let CIP projects and such potentially inform that process. And that was put in place when this policy process was started over 20 years ago now. So we review the map, we review the policy. Sometimes we make recommendations on just the map, not the policy, et cetera, depending on what's going on. And then we have requests both from private property owners. The city can be considering changes to the map itself, and the city also sometimes is dealing with its own properties and deciding and bringing those in and making sure they're within the annexation area. We've done that with parks in the past too. So in this process this year, we had some property owner requests. We had that one city-initiated portion on Central that you already acted on, and then we have some policy recommendations that are coming forward. All the policy, any amendments to the map or the policy go to the city council, and you take final action on that. Our committee is made up of basically all the different departments in the city that are involved in any of the development services, land use, utilities, infrastructure, et cetera. So tonight we actually have Chief St. John and Chief Valdez here from the committee, obviously, as well as planning. But you also, we have transit weighing in on these requests, administration's here. Chris normally, Kukulski, our city administrator, has been attending the meetings. Parks, and then Public Works and Finance has been involved in some of the discussions too. So it's a pretty comprehensive committee group. This is our current limits of annexation map. You last acted on this in August of 2021. And just real briefly, just in terms of the areas, you're pretty familiar with this. The blue area is the city limits. The red is our city annexation petition area, which is if properties within that area that can petition and be brought before council for action on an annexation directly. And then we have the orange long range area where the city is recognizing that the potential for the city to grow into those areas and provide services in those areas is real, but there's additional analysis potentially that could happen as part of that, whether it's a city then initiated map change or if there's a request from a property owner. And then
Everything else outside of that is, you're outside the annexation map. However, this purple line, just to give you some context, is also our zoning boundary that goes around here. So you see that kind of outside that, but we're just looking at these annexation map elements right now. So we had 2 property owner initiated requests this cycle. The committee discussed and reviewed them at length and in depth. We had to go back a couple times to the applicants for more information. We had multiple meetings throughout the late end of 2022 and then through this whole spring to get enough information and then to move forward with recommendations. The applicants attended many of our meetings. We do have representatives from both the Dover Ranch request and Sweetgrass Meadows here this evening if you have specific technical questions that maybe they can answer. But they've been involved in those discussions and been asked many questions by the committee as part of our process. One of the things that I wanted to mention that's also noted in the memo is we know that obviously that there's a cost of service study that's moving forward. Baker Tilly is under contract, and that's going to move forward in the next 4 or 5 months to get that completed. And what we want to make sure we understand that could certainly impact future decisions with the map and policy, and maybe even look at how the map and policy are used. For the moment, we're operating under the current policy and map. We have requests. We've been through the process through the winter like we do normally, and so that's why we're saying to you, we need you to take action, make decisions on this currently, understanding that in the future there may be new information and things that change how we address that. So just wanted to mention that as well, because that's obviously could have some real implications long term for some of the information that we have for these decisions. I'm glad you brought that up, if you don't mind, since it's a work session.
I think we should have him finish his presentation.
Because he was just bringing something up that I wanted to ask him. So I'm gonna go into the details on the 2 requests, so we can give you more information on that again, coming out of your memo. We've got the 2 properties. Here's the current map showing the Dover Ranch area up in in the Heights area. You can see that that's partly outside of the annexation map, but partly within our long range boundary area. And then Sweetgrass Meadows area here, which is just south of Copper Ridge. That's city limits right there in the blue, and that's the area here. And it's adjacent to city limits, but outside of our long range area and our annexation area. So just to speak in some detail on the Dover Ranch request, this is a 743 acre property. As I said, directly north of actually what's developing right now in the High Sierra development up in the Heights. And this would just be basically adjacent to that city limits where that's happening in that whole area across from north of Glen Eagles and Annandale in that area. The developer applicant is asking to get this included in the city annexation petition area to then gradually over time annex portions of it and eventually develop the entire property, but to do it in pieces. They're estimating full build out with this size property 15 to 25 years, so pretty big range there, and certainly not overnight. And their estimates based on the different types of land uses and zoning that could occur in that area are potentially up to 9,000 people total if the entire thing was built out. One of the things that's important is obviously at this point we don't have, they're not annexed and they're not, we're not working through zoning, but certainly with something of this scale, you're gonna have multiple zoning types, both housing, commercial, et cetera. So you're talking about long-term, a variety of land uses in that area. In terms of utilities, the city expects that they can serve this area with water and sewer, given the proximity that we have with the development that's just to the south and the existing services in that area. City is aware, the County Water District of Billings Heights is exploring extension of one of their main water lines from Alexander Road and then down basically Glen Eagles in this area. They did provide that information to city staff and the annexation committee, and we provided comment back to them on that project and said, we're planning at this point to provide water and sewer in this area, so be aware of that, like even though we know that you're looking at this line extension. So just to make sure everybody knows that knows that that's been proposed, but the city's got, the plan is for both water and sewer in that area. In terms of transportation, there's a lot of potential connectivity in this area with Glen Eagles in this
location. You've got obviously Annandale running east-west. We've got Governors also coming up, and then Alexander Road. There's right-of-way extension that eventually could connect in here, so you could have, and then there's some smaller residential streets coming out of the High Sierra development that would connect into this too. So there's a lot of potential for how infrastructure could be connected, and certainly for participation of the developer in construction of those streets and the infrastructure that would go into that area, given the fact that the entire thing would be into the city. Public safety wise, obviously an ultimate build out there, maybe a decade or two from now, there may be need to accommodate additional public safety services for something, an area of this size. But the police and fire did share during our discussions, they obviously have additional resources right now based on the public safety levy and the way things are being organized to be able to accommodate some initial expansion in this area. In the police area, we have obviously additional officers, but also community service officers, which has helped with how they handle calls and the types of issues that they need to go out on, so that provides a little capacity. And then the fire department, both with Station 8 being opened up in the Heights, and then also with the mobile response teams, that's providing some flexibility both to reduce the number of fire engine calls where you don't need to have a fire engine, and also with 2 stations in the Heights, obviously that's a really big difference in that area. So those are just some of the points regarding that. In terms of parks and transit, parks and open space would be dedicated and required as they went through zoning and also through subdivision. So those would be happening in this area. We would anticipate there's some trail and park corridors and things through as coming up from High Sierra. Obviously some of that could be extended, but there would be additional significant areas based on, again, the scale of kind of this entire area if it was built out. And then transit, also, they don't serve right up to the boundary in this area. They're further south there, closer to Skyview High School, but over time, obviously, depending on the build out and densities there, they could be moving up into that area. But for the moment, they would be south of that area. In terms of recommendation, the annexation committee is recommending that this Doe Ranch property be included in the current city annexation limits of annexation area for future petition for annexation, and to basically ensure that this area does develop in the city, in the Heights area, and to city standards. So that's the first one, and I can move on and complete the other one. And keep it like that. So Sweetgrass Meadows. So switching gears out to the west end. This is Rimrock Road right there, and 70th Street West is right where that the edge of the eastern edge of the property is located. And then you've got 62nd. That's where the new roundabout is being constructed, and then Grand Avenue to the south. This area, this is about a 240 acre property, multiple tracks in that area, just to the southwest of 70th and Rimrock intersection, and just south of this Copper Ridge that's building out right in this area here, directly up to the north that's in the city now. Again, the requester is wanting to have the city consider including this in the annexation area so that they can, again, also gradually annex portions of this property over time, and then eventually it would be completely built out. Their estimate of time is maybe in the 10-year time frame based on what they know right now of market conditions. I did want to clarify something regarding some information in the memo. It talks about 300 residential units and about 1,000 people. I made a mistake with the numbers there. So the actual units would be 288 multifamily units, and then additionally 816 single family. So the total number of people, estimating about 2.5 people per household, is about 2,700, not 1,000. So just wanted to make sure you're aware that it's a larger, obviously more people total that would occupy that area if it was built out, or when it was built out completely. In terms of water and utilities, right now there are some service challenges related to this area. However, obviously we have water and sewer in that rimrock right there with Copper Ridge, and water would be able to be provided throughout with the connections being able to be included on 70th as well as on Rimrock. There is, because of the topography of this area, about half this property could be served with the current wastewater system with gravity. The southern half would have to potentially have some a lift station or more lift stations included to be able to provide sewer back up to the city sewer system because of kind of the slopes in that area, the topography in that area. So that would be something that would have to be looked at as the property was built out. And then there's also ultimately some additional water for the water system in this area, some additional pressure that would be needed. It's already an issue in the area, so it's not specifically to this property, but with this building out back at 58th and Grand, the city does have plans in the future for a new water pressure pump station to be able to add some pressure to this area. So those are a couple things that would be involved in gradually building this out. In terms of transportation infrastructure, one of the things that's unusual about this property location is that you have Rimrock Road, which is in the city, and the city's done improvements to Rimrock Road, but south of Rimrock in this area is in the county. 70th is entirely in the county. It is paved to a county standard, not to a city standard, but down to Grand and then connects to Grand, which is also paved but is in the county. So you have a situation where with this development happening, it would contribute to improvements along Rimrock, but you have a situation where half of, one side of those roads are in the county and are not contributing, obviously, and we don't expect this area to start coming into the city in the short term. If you're familiar with that area, it's mostly 5-acre sort of ranchette type houses sometimes with livestock and such. So this area is in the county, so you'd have improvements being contributed to help work with Rimrock, but you wouldn't be having the same thing happening with 70th and with Grand. 62nd actually doesn't go all the way through currently in this area. There's some pieces that are missing in the center there. So just making sure that everyone's aware that there could be projects in the future to help with Rimrock and some of those improvements that would have to be funded. In terms of public safety, this area is not within the Billings Urban Fire Service area. It's actually in the Molt Volunteer Fire Service area. One of the issues that came up with our fire department regarding this is that there's a concern about the uncertainty of county development out here in the future with cisterns or dry hydrants when it's already not in the service area, but yet Molt can't fight structure fires. So you have a situation where the city, Billings Fire Department, is already helping save properties out in this area because it's in Molt, but yet the water supplies and those things are very kind of unknown and iffy for that. So one of the concerns and one of the reasons for the recommendation of getting this into the city ultimately is that you would have roads built to city standard, hydrants with pressure for water available, and also the city's already dealing with fire issues because of Molt out there. So it's like, well, they're gonna do that. Why not have it so that the facilities and infrastructure are actually reliable and that they know they're going to be able to deal with issues in that area. So that's a situation with this that's unusual because it is outside the current BUFSA area. In terms of capacity, again, kind of similar to the Heights, we've got the mobile response team. Station 7 out there has potential, additional capacity with that response unit, and then so you're not sending the fire truck unless you actually have a fire, and so you have that versatility, and the chief can speak to that if you have more questions on that issue. And then in terms of police, this would be an area that they're already going up here to Copper Ridge, but currently, of course, this would be sheriff, so that would be an area that would be added to that, where they're already in this area for calls. They would be including this area also in that, and same issues. They've got a little more capacity right now with the additional resources from the public safety levy to be able to deal with some of that as it's phased in. Parks and transit, similar to before. Parks would be provided as development occurs, and open space within the area, the 240-acre area. There are some significant, there's the Little Cove Creek going through this area and some drainages, so there's potential for some open space and some other mitigation for stormwater and such, and flood area within that in the future. But that would be when those park requirements would be met. And then transit right now wouldn't be coming out this way in the near future. There's not enough to, in terms of housing and density, there's not enough to bring them out there with what's up here already, and this wouldn't change that. transit is further back to the east for this. So with that, again, the committee's recommendation was to include this property, really with a desire to see both urban development to city standards and city controlling of what the development is how it's gonna be done in that area. And that's our kind of the main basis for that recommendation, knowing that there are some future challenges or future resource needs that could occur over the time that as development is built out in that area. So with that, I would be happy to answer questions. If you want to stop before we go into the policy, that probably makes sense. And Monica starts talking about kind of some totally different parts of the policy itself, not the requests.
So is there anyone else you think we should hear before we ask questions? I see the
I
two
don't-
chiefs are here.
Yeah, I don't think, do you guys have anything you want to add before you get questions, or?
Election prizes.
Sure.
Okay, so.
No, I think I don't know if there's anything, Monica, you wanted to add. Was there anything? Okay.
So
No, I think
Councilman Neese, you're the one that came up first. You have a question for Wyatt.
Well, my question was maybe more about the policy, so, because I think in our current policy it says, that you're supposed to, I know we're not in the policy, but we're talking about the annexation, bringing these in. And so it says that we're supposed to have cost of services in the policy. It's already in the policy now. It's not a change, it's already in that policy that when we're doing annexation, we're supposed to see what that cost of services are. And I don't recall seeing those in the past. And so does that mean that we, as a city, just haven't been doing that? So we're not gonna see what the cost of services are when we look at bringing these two properties in?
So Councilmember Neese, yeah, and Mayor, or Deputy Mayor and Council, we haven't, that's the impetus for the cost of service study that you're now embarking on, is that we've never had the amount of detail for the cost impacts that we feel like we need to have to make, help make these decisions in the future. What we've done is we've had all the departments weighing in on their estimates and perspectives on and expert basically opinions on, like, for infrastructure or for public safety or whatever, what they think the impacts might be and the concerns they might have for those impacts, but not down to those dollar amounts or how the revenue and expenses would go. And that's what absolutely we want to achieve that with the cost of service study to inform this process as well as other processes. Yeah.
Okay. And so if you wouldn't mind, go back to the Dover Ranch one. And this kind of relates to the other one too, but when I look at the Dover Ranch there, and I live up in that area, so I know it pretty well, but there's not a whole lot of in and out there. So are we looking at converting some of these streets now, like Annandale or Glen Eagles, into arterial streets so that we can handle, what'd you say, 9,000 homes up there, people? That, so would we look at converting some of those streets there and then to make sure there's, better moving traffic throughout that? Is that?
So Councilmember Neese and Mayor and Council, so the way we've got multiple, right now to your point, we've got multiple Glen Eagles, and Governors and Annandale, that are built and are integrating into, as the development is happening up in this area. You can actually kind of vaguely see some of the area that hasn't yet fully built out right in there. And then you've got smaller residential streets, a network of those that also connect to the development and then back to those main streets. So currently, the anticipation is that with all those continuing to be built and extended as development continues down here and then goes into this area, would provide enough capacity for traffic to move in and out of there. Plus, as I said, for sure, the expectation is that there'd be a connection up here to the north out to 87 that would be brought into that area as well. So you'd have, and those would obviously be connected together. So you'd have both the connections and flow going north-south here, as well as ultimately a connection in that area. So currently would be the plan, not necessarily converting a street, unless, I suppose, engineering or public works could weigh in on that, but just using the ones we have.
Yeah, my concern in that area is because I ride my bike through there, things like that. Most of those are city streets, and if we're putting 9,000 homes up there, it's going to be very difficult for police and fire to get to where they need to get there in any kind of speed, because they're all residential streets. They're not, and the way the developers are building those in those areas, you kind of see them. They're twisty turning. They kind of loop around, and there's no straight up, no straight down. And so I don't know if we look at doing something like this, do we need to put that in the annexation agreement that says we need to have some defined arterial streets so that we can get people to the emergency places, sooner and quicker?
I mean, certainly when we get further, if you were to amend the map and get this into the area where it could be annexed, and then we got an annexation petition for a portion of the property, that type of detailed discussion would occur, which is, what's the plans for that area, what type of improvements are gonna be needed, and then with subdivision and other, with the further detail, we would be able to work through that. So I guess, I don't know, I'm not gonna say, we would require an arterial.
Not so the
Yeah.
annexation development agreement, but you're saying just do it in the subdivision agreement.
Sure. I think the important thing to remember too about the construction of new roads, especially ones that are classified as say like arterials or collectors, is the relationship that the long-range transportation plan has on that. The functional classification map actually identifies, where those extensions occur of those types of roads. And so that document typically guides where the extension of arterials and collectors has to occur versus local streets. Because, a developer would have more flexibility with identifying local streets, but they do have to construct what is part of the long-range transportation plan functional classification.
Okay, so that may be helpful to see some of that, if we're looking at annexation parcel coming in, how does the long-range transportation plan impact the property we're bringing in? Okay, thank you.
No, enjoyed it.
Thank you. So with we have the annexation policy because we maybe regretted doing some annexation in the past that overextended us in certain ways, or maybe we just didn't have as many the nature of our agreements with it stretched us financially as a city. What do you see as differentiating Dover Ranch and Sweetgrass Meadows from the challenges that the city incurred when we annexed Briarwood and Ironwood?
Yeah, so Councilmember Gulick and Mayor and Council. So one of the things that sort of two things I'll mention, and then if Monica has more to add. But so both of these areas that we're talking about today are adjacent to city limits. Wherever that's where the city limits are. They're adjacent. Certainly in this area with the heights, we have the city already right next door, and we have infrastructure and things that are already right sort of to that area. In this case, we have obviously Copper Ridge to the north. We do have a county area here, so it's not as much, but it's connected to the city limits in this area too, and we have infrastructure that's running out on Rimrock Road. Compared to some of those annexations we did back in that time when we actually did Ironwood in that area, it was like not any really city in that whole area. It was sort of a jump way out. Reberg Ranch, similarly, still not entirely connected, but in that time it was quite far out too. And then Briarwood, which is still, again, you can see there's still some space there, but it went pretty far out from current city limits and for where our proximity to infrastructure was. We did have some situations, like Briarwood was having some water and sewer, I think sewer issues specifically. So that was a whole different kind of situation in the sense that the state was involved and there was a lot of things that the city had to kind of figure out how to respond to, that it was more of a a little bit of a forced situation versus these other areas. So that's different in that respect. And then the other thing in terms of where these are located, the other thing I'll mention is that's definitely become more of a concern, and this council has voiced it as well, is that and staff has experienced it, we're seeing situations with county development in areas that then are potentially causing or can cause long-term challenges for the city in terms of where we're looking at providing services. And when some of those, if we're not making the decision to have something in the city and to city standard in an area, and then it goes into the county, it makes it much more difficult if we want to do something later. And also potentially in the end, we may end up with it anyway, and then it's not built to the standards that we would like. So that's become more of a conversation in the last, I'd say 10 years than it was back in 2001 when we first started this, which is,
Can I add to that
Yeah.
comment? So I think one of the greatest challenges is that, years ago, there was kind of a standard development pattern of what would happen in the county. You needed a minimum of an acre because by the time you had your well, by the time you had your drain field, and by the time you had your replacement drain field, you couldn't do it in much less than an acre. Now, with certain technologies, we see very sophisticated systems that are occurring in county subdivisions. We have both community wastewater and community wells that we're seeing densities that really could be city level densities. So for instance, we've done a couple of subdivisions in the last, when I say we, Yellowstone County, because we're city county planning. Yellowstone County has approved some subdivisions that are outside of zoning with lots as small as 6,000 square feet. That used to be unheard of in the county. As you can see, this property is located outside of the city zoned area. So, the idea that there would be, perhaps stonewalling or not the ability to further develop some of these properties just because you may think they wouldn't be able to get the densities because they wouldn't have city services. We have examples on the West End. We have examples in the Heights where these new systems are being utilized more and more. And so I think from a development pattern, we didn't used to see that in the county, and we see it now. So I think just to kind of dovetail on what Wyeth is saying about the, what's occurring in the county, that's a major driver of that.
Thank you. I think I have a question for one of the developers. If Dover Ranch developer would like to come up, I just have a little question.
If you could give us your name and address, please.
Yeah.
Taylor Kasparek with Performance Engineering. We're at 608 North 29th Street.
The question is easy, actually. Don't worry, it's very easy. The question is, why do you want to be in the city? Because considering the marketing and considering Ms. Plecker's comments about being able to have a higher density within county development, why do you want to be in the city?
Yeah, I mean, I think, when you look at the services that are offered with the city, obviously a more reliable water system and sewer system are one of the big draws. You can get higher density. It might not be the case in particular with Dover Ranch, just given the soil characteristics up there. But I'd say that's a main draw because we would be able to get higher density on this subject parcel with city services versus county. With that being said, if county water district were to extend their water line down there, that would take one portion out of the equation if it were to be developed in the county. So I guess in short form, and answering your question, council member, we would be able to achieve higher densities on this subject property with city services versus without.
Just to follow up.
Yes.
So how does that impact the economics of what you're doing with housing? How does it impact the marketing of what you're doing with housing?
Yeah, and I think that, when we're talking over the span of 15 to 25 years build out, honestly, that might change throughout the course of that time. I would say right now, with the current market trends and everything, I think there's more multifamily development need in the community. And so obviously with more multifamily, that's a higher density type of development. So higher density, if the need is there, it's going to allow us to develop and market those units or houses or whatnot at a better offering than a single family residence in the county, for instance.
Thank you.
Well, as long as you're there, would you like to say anything? As long as you're here.
Yeah, I'd add on. Really appreciate the time. I think, as Wyatt referenced earlier, as far as the previous limits and annexation map being approved in August of 2021, really appreciate the council and planning looking at the annexation policy as it currently stands and being open to more of those city initiated amendments to the map. Part of the reason we are putting forth all 743 acres right now is just the time that it takes to go from application to amend the map to actually having the map amended. So as you can see, if we're pushing up on 2 years since that last map was amended, if it's truly a 2-year process to get something into the limits of annexation, I think it might exacerbate kind of the issues that we're talking about as far as, I don't know if there's many developers that would want to sit on a piece of land for 2 years in order for that map to be amended, in order to have the ability to even go to annexation, zoning, subdivision. So I guess with that, time is of the essence in development, and luckily we submitted our application basically right before the close deadline of this cycle. But it can, in essence, push upwards of 2 years. So it's very much appreciated that, the thoughtfulness and the resources that the planning, engineering, public safety, all the departments put into generating these recommendations. And hope that, once it's presented to council, that the decision can be made so that a developer can go one way or the other, regardless of that decision.
Thank you. Is there any questions for Councilman Neese?
Yeah, thank you, Deputy Mayor. Real quick, I know you probably don't have all this planned out and stuff, but as you do develop that area, I mean, do you have intention, or is there an intention maybe to build some community commercial, some things like that, to where it's not just all residential?
Yeah, so the immediate development plan of the contract owner, so they don't own the property yet, they're under contract to purchase it. Their immediate development plan is residential, mixed multifamily as well as single family homes. Obviously, going through the urban planning study, it's evident that when you bring in 9,000 people, you're going to need some commercial use as well. So we have accounted for that and how that 743 acres will be broken out. With this immediate development plan, we don't have any commercial incorporated into that.
Thank you.
And I would just add, I know it was a question previously as far as the arterial streets or whatnot. And I think Monica did a great job of saying that, in large part that's going to be determined by the long-range urban transportation plan. Glen Eagles and Annandale are both arterial roads currently. So in the urban planning study, we did go through a high level analysis, but they're built 49-foot backup curb to backup curb, which would be very similar to Lake Elmo, Rimrock Road, Poly Drive. And so we did a comparison of what those roadways see as far as volume, and kind of broke down where trips would be going from that 743 acres to the various routes and everything, to kind of give a perception of what that would look like on the current road.
Thank you.
Any other questions, Councilman? Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. So the new wastewater technology, I assume that is still releasing something into the underground?
Yes, so Councilmember Shariki, I mean, there's all sorts of different technologies that are being used. There is still a discharge of some kind. There's everything from, mound systems, pressure dosing systems, various things. But the way that we're seeing some county subdivisions develop, there's systems that are able to handle that currently. What the county has not realized yet, and actually has one example, Lindley Lakes, that area out on 72nd, that was one of the first community systems that was done. And the maintenance of those is incredibly onerous on homeowners associations. We all know that homeowners associations very oftentimes don't work the way that they were intended. And ultimately, we're seeing situations where now those residents are coming to the county and saying, we need your assistance with maintaining these systems because, it's more than the HOA ever realized it may be. And those systems also have a life on them. So we've got about 14, 15 similar systems in the county right now. The most recent one that's achieving some of those really low small lots for the county is a development called the Nines, which is, on the far west end. So, we're seeing a variety of technologies. There's some challenges we know about with, you have to do annual inspections, provide information to, the state about the operating of that system, making sure that there's inspections done. Evidently, those types of businesses that do that kind of work are few and far between. We're only aware of one in Livingston. I mean, they present their challenges, but they don't present their challenges for a while, which is, what keeps them attractive to developers in the county.
Like when there's a mess that someone has to clean up.
Correct.
So related question to that, are we keeping track of the groundwater? Is anyone keeping track of what's going on in the groundwater here in the Heights?
Do we have any more questions for the gentleman here before we move on?
I just have one quick one,
And then we can-
which is this, and again, this just doesn't directly pertain to us at the city level, but we work with the school district as well. Do you happen to know what schools that Dover Ranch kids would end up going to? I mean, I assume Skyview, but I'm curious if you know off the top of your head, because I feel like the schools are seeing so much pressure from the edges of the city, and they're trying to reconcile. Independent.
Eagle Cliff and Castle Rock.
Okay, thank you.
What about, isn't there not an independent? Independent's not one of them?
I don't believe so.
Thank you.
Do we have any more questions for the gentleman here? No, thank you very much.
Yes, thank you, and happy to come back up.
So as long as you were here, I think we should have Mr. Wild come up from Sweetgrass Meadows to give his presentation if you get a chance, or questions.
Can I ask the same question?
Yes.
Yeah. I have the same question for you, if you know.
I was hoping you'd ask me that same question, actually. So Doug Wild with the Island Mountain Development Group in Sweetgrass Meadows. We visited regularly. I enjoy visiting with y'all. So your question of why we would want to develop in the city versus the county. Firstly, when we looked at this property, it seemed like the responsible thing to do. The whole northern property line has city sewer, city water already in there. It seemed, in our mind, irresponsible to even pursue a county development because the money's already been paid for that infrastructure. The maintenance already needs to be there for that infrastructure. Let's use the infrastructure, which then helps pay for the maintenance of the infrastructure. So it really seemed like the rational thing to do. As far as density and whatnot, with where this property currently sits, we definitely can get higher density in the city, which can lead to better housing opportunities. The question of, are we going to put commercial out here? Absolutely. We see Copper Ridge is a great development. It's a whole bunch of just houses, and great little neighborhoods with windy roads that I get lost in every time I go, but it's just houses. We would, per the current zoning requirements, but also because we would want to, there would be a certain level of multifamily that would go in there. There would be commercial. We've kind of already designated that corner of 70th and Rimrock. We're not going to do anything but commercial there, even if it takes a little while to get enough rooftops to make the commercial make sense. There really should be commercial on that note in our mind. But if this is a county development, we can't do those things. We can't put together, and one of the reasons why we asked for all of it at once is we want to try to master plan a larger plan for the area. If we just, at one point as we were looking at the annexation and presenting to city staff, is well, what if we did a smaller section of it? Why I mentioned that part of it is easily served by gravity sewer, the other part would need some sort of low pressure sewer, a lift station, which, I mean, by the way, everything on the south side of Grand Avenue, that's exactly how it's done, is a low pressure sewer or a pump. So it's not an uncommon thing to see in the city. But we looked at, well, what if we just took that top, half and petitioned for that? And we really thought that was doing a disservice because we want to be able to master plan a large community, which would then require more green space, larger green spaces, so that we wouldn't have, a little park here and a little park here. Let's have one nice park. Let's provide enough areas so we can have good commercial, so we can have multifamily, so we can do it right in our mind is really why we want to petition this to the city. Can it develop this county? Yes. Could I get 6,000 square foot lots? No. In all reality, I couldn't. I don't have the water there. It is the biggest driver for this specific area. Is it's dry. Could we do, 1 acre lots? Could we even get to half acre lots? Possibly. But I don't think I'd get quite that dense. One of the comments that was made about, having to upgrade maybe a water pressure station here, that needs to happen anyway. In all reality, whether we were to bring this in or not, it's my understanding that there's already low pressure in the area. I don't. Is there other stuff I should talk
How
about?
about the schools, where the kids go to school?
I would assume West High School. Copper Ridge currently all goes to Boulder, and feeds to Lewis and Clark.
Ben Steele.
Ben Steele, that fancy new one I forget about. Yes, Ben Steele.
So do we have any questions for Mr. Weil? Mr.
Yes, I do.
Councilman Gould?
I think it is a good point in terms of being able to help support some of the infrastructure that's already out there. Just kind of curious from a developer's perspective, what do you see as the impediments, or why aren't you looking at more infill? This is adjacent to our perimeter, right? But infill development. What are the impediments to that?
So I guess when you refer to infill, you're looking for these already red areas right in town. And as you look at on the next presentation that Monica's going to put together about the map potential amendments and policy amendments, a big chunk of those are already developed as county. And so they're really, I'm not going to knock down houses on 1 acre to build 4 houses on 1 acre. It's not going to happen, right? It's not financially feasible. Everyone would lynch me if I tried, right? And so there's not really, there are some parcels between here and there. For one, they haven't been for sale. And a lot of those, like Wyatt mentioned, like that section that's in the white zone between, I think it's 62nd and 70th, they're not densely developed, but they're already developed. Someone's got a house on 5 acres, a house on 10 acres. At some point, could those subdivide to higher density? Yes, in the near future. It won't, because it's a guy that wants his 5 acres and loves being so close to Billings, because Billings is great, right? But there's not a lot of available land that's already got easy access to sewer and water, city sewer and water, that's easy to develop. You're talking about this as not infill. I think it's not in Molt, so that's for sure. It's not that far out. It's serviced by Molt Fire, I guess, but it is right adjacent to city. So, if your definition of infill is Peter Yagan, where the cows hang out, my wife laughs every time we drive by cows in the middle of town. Yes, that's infill. No, that's not for sale, and hasn't been, and maybe won't be. And so, this is as infill as been available on the market anytime soon. We just are about to start infrastructure on something that went to council last year for Buffalo Crossing subdivision, which is 60th and Grand, which already was in the red zone, so we didn't need an annexation map for that. Again, that was right on the edge of city boundaries. It had city sewer on one side. It made sense to service it because that's what was there. This really isn't much different. It's 70th instead of 60th on Rimrock instead of Grand Avenue. We're not, it feels like it's a ways out there because you drive by a lot of farmland to get there, but it's not farmland, most of it. Most of it's somebody's ranchette.
Is there any more questions for Mr. Weil? Well, now that we've asked you questions, do you want to give us your 1, 2, 3 of why you want to build here, and anything else that you want to say?
I guess I do want to make comment. I emailed you all a letter. I think you all had the opportunity to read my email about pushing this off and whatnot. I obviously wasn't particularly happy. Much as I like hanging out with you, I'd rather only do it as seldom as I need to. Because you don't want to hear from me all that often, I'm sure. But it really makes sense as the policies that they're looking at changing. I've had a chance to read through some of the packet that you're given, at least at the previous council meeting. I'm not sure if they made changes since then. But the policy, like the other engineer mentioned, it definitely makes sense to be able to move this process along faster than it is. And some of the concern of, well, if they can bring them forth at any time, then you're doing this all the time. I get that's a concern. I don't think that's a big concern since the last time it was amended was 2 years ago, right? And so they're not coming all that often for asking, but to have to wait the time frame it takes in the current policy is hard, and it stifles. It doesn't hurt development; it hurts city development. Kind of like I outlined in that letter. It doesn't. It encourages people to go to the county because it's easier, and they already know it's in the county. They can develop it, but it's not. I mean, like what I mentioned, it makes much more sense to have city infrastructure here versus county infrastructure here. It makes more sense to use infrastructure that's there. And so that's why we've waited the year and a half to try to make this happen. Does it make more money for us to develop in the city? It probably does. I mean, I won't deny that that's the case, and partially that's a driver. We're going to make money. I get it, but also it just makes sense for the city.
Any other questions for Mr. Wild?
Mr. Wild. Oh, so I can go now.
Okay, thank you, Doug.
Thank you, Doug.
Thank you for coming. Before we go on to Monica with policy, maybe we should have the two chiefs, since they're here, talk about these two areas just briefly. That way you don't have to spend all night here.
Sure, Mayor, Council, good evening. Yeah, very, very quickly, and I'll speak a little bit for the chief. I don't think either one of us are against annexation and development. We certainly understand that it's necessary. We are very, very mindful and really want to make sure that anything we bring in makes sense, it is controlled, and it's done logically. And these things here are pretty much contiguous to areas that we are already in. Logistically speaking, for us, we're much more nimble than the fire department. So we can get through the windy streets, we can do this, do that, and the other thing. I would be remiss if I didn't tell you every time one of those sheets comes, and I know Wyeth hates to see them, that we have a finite budget. You have given us budget authority for 167 cops. That's including the safety levy and all the stuff that goes with it. We keep adding more property. You're talking about 10,000 people up there. I'm going to guess not all of them are going to be as pure as a driven snow and not cause any problems. As we continue to add and grow and bring more people in, I would be remiss if I didn't tell you that we have to account for, it needs to stay on your radar, that we need to add resources to handle what's going to eventually come in. We understand 10, 15 years down the road, right now we're talking about dirt, but eventually something's going to be there. And we have this discussion all the time, especially in the Heights. Council member is supremely frustrated that we still are going to be running with 2 and 4 people 3 times a day, and now we're going to add 10,000 more. Not opposed to that, but please keep in mind that we need to keep up with the resources. I can let the chief talk again. I don't have the logistical difficulties that the fire department does. We're a bit more nimble. They're coming from fixed locations. They need water. They got big trucks. We're a little bit different than that. But the thing is, if you're going to keep adding more density, multifamily stuff, they're going to generate workforce. And if you keep doing that and we stay stagnant, we're going to be having that safety levy discussion, and I know that the voters are probably worried about that. Mayor, any questions?
Thank you, Chief. Any questions for Chief? Councilman Gooley?
Yeah, Chief St. John, you already know that I have concerns about growing, but I also understand, I think there's some good points that have been made. But the concerns about growing in general, where the cost of services is higher than we get in tax revenue. That being said, these new areas will be have tax revenue. Does that not go towards the public safety levy as well as our general fund that would allow more resources to the police department?
Absolutely does, but I think if you talk to Mr. Zeller that we don't realize those funds immediately. It takes a while to get where we need to be. So when these things develop, we start getting hit with calls for service. We need assets now. And to wait for all the tax base to come in and get caught up and all that, You'd have to talk with him on the timeline, but I remember him clearly saying, yeah, people are coming in here, population's growing, but we don't realize the benefit of their tax contribution for a little while down the road. And so again, how do we deal with that on the front end? I'm not opposed, again, to very, very thoughtful, logical annexation. Not opposed to that at all. But please keep in mind that, your resources are stagnant right now. Based on what you said, that we're going to assess the voters. And so we're at where we're at, and we'll continue to get there. But what happens is that it takes longer, and then sometimes, again, the 911 can you hold is not acceptable. So we have to prioritize, and that's not where we want to go. So that's what my town crier admonition is all the time. Please keep in mind, that all of this without the commensurate resources can, will, and has affected our ability to deliver service. Mayor?
Thank you, Chief.
Thank you.
Chief Valdez?
Yeah, I can absolutely echo what you just said. Same concerns, but on the flip side, we do a lot in the county as it is now. So with those two properties there, one being in the Bussa, the other one adjacent to or absolutely touching Copper Ridge, as far as time and distance goes, it doesn't change anything for us. And as far as moving water, like I said, we do it in the county anyway. If there's no hydrants out there, there's dry hydrants nearby. There are hydrants in the Copper Ridge subdivision if we do have to go west. And then also the MRTs have taken a load off of us as well to have a higher state of readiness for us. So that's the rosier spin on it. But yeah, I will stand with the chief as well with some of those concerns as far as being able to keep up with those demands.
So any questions for Chief Valdez, Councilman Joy?
Thank you. Chief Valdez, we have annexed property in the southwest along the river, Annafeld maybe, and some other annexations down there. And we know that Fire Station 5 is on 24th and Chick-fil-A, so I don't know what other streets there are out there, but so what are we looking at in terms of the need to grow our fire stations, I guess?
Well, going back to the first study from 2018, said that we need a station on 48th and Esper, and that nothing's changed. We still need a station there to help us with all the growth on the west end. Right now, we have a situation where both stations 7 and 5 actually overlap and converge in the southwest corridor, is what we call it, Shiloh area and west. And because of the travel that it takes and the time and distance, it takes those two vehicles or those two units out of service for quite a while before they get back in. Now, thankfully, we're only talking 3 to 4 calls a day right now. That's going to continue to increase demand. When you get on the other side of the freeway, that's a whole other story with the Annafeld subdivision. Tightly packed in densely packed areas, and so we do worry about time and distance on the other side of the freeway. We're trying to mitigate something in a hurry.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Councilman Neese?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Chief, just real quick on this, since this area on the Sweetgrass, that's in the Molt area. So will that change to Billings, and then will the taxes go into the Billings area for the fire department, or will it still be going to the Molt Fire Department for them?
If we annex it?
If we annex it.
That should come to Billings.
It will switch into Billings. So they will switch from the Molt Fire to the Billings Fire.
That is correct.
All right, I just want to make sure that it's not keeping it there. Okay, and then Deputy Mayor, I did have a question if no one else has for this.
So any other questions for Councilman? Yes, sir.
Can you give us a 30-second special on how you move water?
So we have what we call water tenders. They're big water tankers is what they are, 2,500 gallons a piece. We have one on the west end, and we have one in our downtown area that can go to the heights. And we also have other departments surrounding us that have water tenders as well. And once you get what's called a shuttle relay established, it's amazing how much water we can move in a short amount of time. So that's what I mean by moving water.
How many hoses does that keep going?
Quite a bit.
Yeah.
Well, next time we do some training, I'll invite you out so you can see.
Okay. Yeah, I saw you guys out at City College the other day.
Thank you very much, gentlemen. Okay, let's go back to questions for Wyeth Friday.
Wyeth, you mentioned that this sweetgrass is outside our zoning area, the purple line, right? So will this change, bring that into so that's how we change that purple line, is by just bringing stuff in.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to compete with Laurel City or anything like that. Whoever gets there first brings it in. Okay. Thank you.
Correct, yeah, and actually just, so a few years back when this portion of Copper Ridge out here went out, that actually, the boundary was, the zoning was here and then that became city zoning. So yeah, you'd see the same thing, this would come into that area and be.
Great, thank you.
Yeah.
And it requires the P&D process, so it can't just be like a singular zone.
Right, yeah.
So Monica, maybe you'll go ahead, Councilman Repsis.
Do we have any evidence that the red zone actually encourages developers to build in the city?
Evidence to,
I mean, the reason we have the red zone is to make it easier for developers to build in the city. Is there any evidence that actually happens?
well,
Because, I mean, like we just out on Central, we just had developers just say, no, we're gonna develop in the county anyway, and they were in the red zone.
yeah, Councilmember Rupsis, and Deputy Mayor and Council. So, yeah, I mean, the thing that's important with the red area that's been done over time is that, and that's kind of why you see kind of some of the depth here. It's, approximately a 500 foot, in some places more 1,000, but off of areas where the city has got some infrastructure in place, is to say, if you've got property in that area and you want to come into the city, we are in close proximity to be able to get infrastructure there. And in some cases, obviously, if it's a piece where the city's adjacent or whatnot, then you've got multiple services already being provided. So that there's a background to why that area is identified that way, and the development community knows that if they look into those areas, then those services are within proximity. Certainly, we've had an example and a few, I guess I would say close calls that hopefully are gonna stay in this, or be in the city, where you're right, there's nothing that requires development in that area to be in the city. And so a developer can choose to develop in the county even though they're in an area where services are in near proximity and it's within the red area. Certainly there's a few areas where we'd have to stretch services a little further, but we've had conversations in some of those cases with developers and said, hey, we'll work to figure this out. And in cases they say yep, and in one case recently they said no, we're gonna stay in the county. But so it's really that there's no requirement, but the service infrastructure is sending the signal that that's an area where it's available. I don't know if you want to.
Yeah, I do, but
Yeah,
I don't know if you wanna hear it.
No, it's fine.
So council, I mean, there's like no one tool in planning that is like the singular catalyst for a decision. We've made positive strides when we redid the zoning code. We also redid the county zoning code. Previously, we had a unified code where you could have zones like R6, RMF, things like that in the county. You no longer have access to those types of zones in the county. That was a huge thing that the county gave up that benefited the city. And so like a tool like that, in combination with other things, helps to slow down county development in those areas. I would say the greatest value of having a map like this where you identify a red area is to say you're signaling predictability to that developer. I mean, the reality is because of the way that the criteria for the annexation, the way that it's written in the annexation policy, it's pretty straightforward. Are you gonna meet a certain density? Are you gonna develop to city standards? Are you gonna sign a waiver of right to protest? It should be predictable. And the red area has been predictable in the past for developers. So I would say if anything, while Wyeth hits the nail on the head, there is nothing requiring it. It is a signal of predictability that is of high value to the development community.
So we're kind of not necessarily constrained, because that purple line isn't really a thing, it's just a line we draw, right? So.
No, it's a thing.
It-
Yeah, it is absolutely a thing.
But we can change it very easily with our own report, right?
You can't change it. You can only change the zones that are in the city limits. That boundary right there is actually governed by the Board of County Commissioners, and it would have to be up to them to extend that boundary. The only time that you get to influence it is if you're taking in more land into your jurisdiction.
Okay, all right,
Yeah.
thank you. Is there, what would prevent us from saying everything on the west end, on the north side of the highway, inside that purple line is suddenly in the red zone? And if you want to develop anywhere in there, that's fine, but you might have to pay to extend your own services to your development, and then you can recoup those as things might go ahead of you. Couldn't we do something like that and then just open it up?
I would discourage you from doing that, because at some point I think then it's like, why have the policy, why have the designations, and why distinguish where you have the ability to serve more quickly than others. The reality is that whole north-south corridor that's in the orange area, I mean, there's nothing there, and there's nothing planned there anytime soon. There's nothing in the CIP. There's nothing kind of in some of the long-range plans that are a part of Public Works. So it would be wrong and inaccurate to say to a developer, like, yeah, this property is feasible for coming into the city in the near term, because the reality is that it's not. However, it's your policy and your map, and you can certainly take a different approach and say you don't want to have distinguished areas. I would say that would be a complete overhaul of the policy. That's not something that we have the resources to take on and kind of do that kind of revamping of an entire policy. But there's, I guess, to the point, you don't have to have it look like it does today.
Yeah, and I don't necessarily want to do that. I'm just trying to understand why, if the hurdle is predictability for a developer, and we were to say, if you want to annex into the city and you're currently anywhere in this west end side, we want to have you. We'd much rather have you, even if you're out at 64th and Central. We'd much rather have you develop in the city than not. But this is what it'll take. You'll have to upfront the extension costs on that, and then we'll let you recoup that as other things happen interior to you.
The orange area, Councilmember Rubsis, in order, the way, with the current policy, the way that it reads is, you have to do this urban planning study that considers like upwards of 18 things. And so that means there's 18 things related to development that we've had absolutely zero analysis on whatsoever. And so, really understanding the barriers of what's keeping that property from being easily annexed are not understood.
So let's move on to Monica. Okay, let's do the policy side.
Sorry. I can wait my turn. But, okay, so now we'll move into the policy amendments. I just want to say, to the point that I just made to Councilmember Rupsis, we have not considered overhauling and doing a comprehensive update of the annexation policy. As far as, our work program and the things that are on our plate and our table and deadlines that we have to meet, and also managing our work with the city and the county, it's just not there as a priority, quite frankly. However, that being said, being thoughtful during the annual review process is not lost on us. I have come before you, Wyeth has come before you, and we've heard past council say, that sometimes it's hard to understand the vastness of what's out there in the red area. It appears there's so much land in the red area, why are we adding more to it? Those have been comments that have come up on more than one occasion. And, so taking note of that, as well as taking note of some challenges that we've experienced, it's like, hey, we have an opportunity here where some small changes may go a long ways. That was kind of the motivation towards even bringing you policy amendments in the first place. So with that, we will get into what those policy updates are. Really, why the committee is recommending these is because we think that visually it depicts more accurately land that's available for development, and helps create a better understood expectation of what could happen in the future. And with that, we'll get into really what the meat and potatoes of this are. I would say for the most part, 90% of the policy remains the same. Even the intent of the policy, the content of the policy, it's really not changing with this. But the thought process is right now we have a red area and an orange area. We think that there could be kind of a better understanding of available lands if there was a third designation added. The policy actually would change from referencing a red area and an orange area to just going 1, 2, 3. Here are areas. Zone 1 would be equivalent to the red petition area. Zone 2 would be equivalent to the orange long range area. And Zone 3 would be a new area that is shown in saying, these are county lands that already have development occurring on them. Really barring any sort of unforeseen environmental type issue, the odds of them redeveloping in the city are very slim, especially anytime soon. However, it can happen. It does happen. And we do not want to do anything. I mean, if you put yourself in a homeowner's shoes that's going through some sort of environmental issue like that, or when the state is coming to the city and saying, you have to serve these people, we don't want to put additional barriers from those being able to come into the city. So we've left zones 1 and 2 the same, and we've said Zone 3, we don't see you as any chance of coming in soon. However, you would still be allowed to petition into the city if there were some, catalyst for requiring you to do so. With the zones being broken out, you can kind of get a feel for how much area is really in Zone 1. We've got about 11,500 acres that are, ready to be petitioned for. Zone 2, the long range, where we expect we need more analysis to even understand if we can have it, we're looking at 6,800 acres. And then this Zone 3, it consists of about 2,000 acres. So, I think it just helps us more accurately represent kind of what's out there. So we'll have to get used to, if you adopt this, not saying the red area, but I'll tell you, the colors are really kind of irrelevant, when it comes down to it. You've got Zone 1, 2, and 3 and what they're intended to do.
I like these colors a lot.
Well, you know what? We went with the stoplight scheme. Green means go, yellow means, hey, we need to proceed with caution, and red means no, unless it's an emergency. And then you look both ways. So I mean, that's really the idea behind this, is just to kind of signal a little more obviously. I think it's kind of interesting if we look at where Zone 3 is located, when we're talking, and even some of our earlier discussion with, with like the applicant of Sweetgrass, and you look at, well, why aren't you looking at properties closer? There's quite a bit right there on the west end that isn't available even if it were for sale. So I think being able to understand that the intention is to have it be a helpful tool for you as decision makers, but also, developers as well.
It helps make sense of that corridor over there in the west end.
Sure, absolutely. And so just so that you can see where, in perspective to kind of the new scheme, where the 2 requested areas are, what that may look like. So in addition to the zones and depicting them, I would say the greatest additional amendment is what Taylor and Doug were referring to, where they say flexibility to bring things to council sooner. Right now, we do an annual process. We still envision an annual process. However, we know that sometimes there are developments that occur where, say, new infrastructure is placed, a new subdivision comes in, extends something, you know, that we thought wouldn't be for a while. We have a development like Coca-Cola that comes to the city and says, you know, we want a partnership, let's get a compensation agreement, we're willing to make some extensions. We don't, if there is that type of opportunity, we don't wanna be stifled by, you know, this annual process. And so, there's additional language that basically says that, you know, when new development has occurred or extending infrastructure has happened or private development has occurred that creates opportunity, that the annexation committee would be able to kind of self-initiate and come to council and say, hey, this has occurred, we also have this other development on the line, we need to get this taken care of. And being able to expressly say that in the policy is helpful, so that it sends that signal. I do not, the amendments themselves do not say anything that comes before us can be considered outside of that annual process. But if there are kind of some catalyst actions that make it make sense for us to need to respond to, it would give us that flexibility. So that's a positive.
Made that catalyst.
Well, I don't know. And I say I don't know because there's varying things that are happening there. You know, could portions, like say with the Sweetgrass where we know there's already opportunity for the gravity sewer and we've already got some stuff right up there towards Rimrock, could that be kind of a quick thing to get them going? Perhaps. Also, with some improvements up towards Dover, it's possible. But I would say with these, they likely would still stay with our annual process. I think we're talking Central Avenue would have definitely been something that we would have come to you, you know, more quickly because it has a obvious sort of sense to it, if you will. There is already something there. We're really talking the scale of like Coca-Cola, something you know, big for the city. Inner belt loop, trying to make provisions for that, you know, things of that nature that have like a catalyst behind them. Yeah, I think that's really the intention.
Monica, is that number 6 in the policy?
It would actually be, sure,
Page 3.
it's actually page 2 of 5. Yeah, 2 of 5, and it would be 3A, map amendments. And it basically talks about how, you know, a map amendment may be initiated by city staff. It references the CIP. It talks about new improvements that have been constructed through private development or when it would be beneficial for the city to work with a new development in extending infrastructure and services. That then we could bring forward a city initiated amendment at any time that you would consider.
I shouldn't have interrupted you, so I want you to finish your presentation before we ask questions.
It's okay. I guess I can keep going, but I just want to make sure that everybody makes sense of it. So I can do whatever you prefer.
I mean, my only thought is, if it's annual, could we do it semi-annual? That way at least the developer would know within 6 months versus a year. I mean, that was one of the big issues with Mr. Wild was I had to wait a year. So.
Sure.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the things that I think we'd want to, or we would need to look at with that is with the, because it kind of goes to what we're talking about here with these modifications based on other information or service issues and things that are going on, is if you're going to keep kind of monitoring or connecting with your CIP, and depending on when that's happening, then that's part of the issue of, okay, if we're gonna change this up to less than annually, except for certain circumstances, then we also have to decide what is it that, or, you know, if we're not tying it to that process, then what are we tying it to, if something. And I think the other part of it is, and I totally understand in terms of, you know, the want for this sort of quick response is that it isn't, we don't know when people decide that you make requests, and we have basically all the city departments that have to kind of be involved in that. And so I think that's where we're trying to figure that out, like how do we balance that without just constant, if we were bringing that group together, doing the recommendations, bringing it to you, I mean, that's not a small thing. So that's the part that's challenging, but totally, I think, thinking about that long term in terms of, is the CIP, a critical tie, or is there something we should be looking at that way? And making these changes gets us closer, definitely, than where we were.
So Monica, are you happy with these changes, you think?
Yeah, I mean, I'm definitely happy with them. I want to talk about one more change. And then I want to acknowledge that when this was originally scheduled for council, we did get some feedback from Councilmember Neese and the mayor. So I want to make sure that I cover that too. The other, I think, and the last really substantive change is adding language that talks about, proportionality of what you would expect a developer to incur. And I think that's a good segue to get me to some of the mayor's and Councilmember Neese's feedback. But on page 4 of 5, number 4, where it talks about obligation of the city, and after it goes through the different types of state statutes, staff originally proposed language that says the city may, in its discretion, consider additional conditions of approval that have a clear nexus of proportionality to the subject property. The mayor did, write you all and provide comments to us that said, this was out of the Nolan and Dolan case. It's specific to the Subdivision and Platting Act, and that is all very, very true. I think the merits of it are not lost in just subdivision. When we talk about, what's fair, reasonable, an expectation of the developer and predictability and knowing what they're walking into, it's important to understand that, you're gonna carry your weight of what the impact is. And that council is not going to, surprise you and say, well, annexation is discretionary, so I'm gonna nickel and dime you. Because not only does that put the development community in kind of a tough situation, quite frankly, it puts staff in a difficult situation. We don't even know what bar we're supposed to be meeting. If we know that we need to have metrics that identify what your impact is, we have ways of doing that. We already do that in other land use applications. And so it gives us clear direction. I mean, I don't want to use the mayor as an example when he's not here to maybe defend himself. I'm going to be brave enough to do it, good or bad.
He's listening.
I know. I without putting words in his mouth, at one of our most recent annexations that was near Cottonwood Park, he said, have you made an effort to negotiate kind of additional funds or donations? And no, I did not. I don't even know where to begin with an additional negotiation that's fair. Kind of what is that metric? When we talk about in subdivision nexus of proportionality, we're talking about measuring your trips per day versus existing conditions. We're talking about your lineal feet of frontage. We're talking about hard numbers, and that gives staff a much better starting place to guide developers and to understand, what that might be, than just kind of saying, are we leaving money on the table? So we need that direction. And that's why, I like the words nexus of proportionality. That being said, the mayor did offer up some different language, and I'm okay if the language gets massaged a little bit, so long as the intent is still the same. So if there's really strong aversion to using Nolan and the language for Nolan and Dolan, okay, so be it. But I would still very heavily advocate and recommend to you as council that you're talking about proportionate share, regardless of how you word it, for those reasons.
Are you okay with the changes that were presented then? Because I think that was, the intent of what the mayor and I looked at is, you're right, I don't think we want to make it so that we can just throw anything out there and say, well, you're gonna have to buy the mayor a new car to get this in there. We don't want that. And so we wanted some type of relationship, but we also didn't want to stifle or or inhibit the council from seeing something during the annexation that says, wow, this is something that's gonna happen that maybe wasn't seen that we need to address. And so it has some relation to the property, but maybe not something that we just don't know what it would be.
Right. Yeah, no, and I understand, and ultimately, at the end of the day, annexations are, your decision on them is discretionary. And the way that we do annexation agreements, it's like, if you don't wanna come to the table with what the terms are, then you don't come to the table. I think for sure, so long as there is a defined relationship to that development, we're comfortable with that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that's where we're trying to keep that relationship somehow to that development, yeah.
Exactly. Some of the other changes, we can just walk through those. You had an attachment in your staff report that basically said, council edits, and it was a track changes version. There was some language proposed in, it would be page 1 of 5, section 1, statement of intent. And the additional language would read, this policy is intended solely to provide guidance for the city and the public and shall not create any right or interest of any kind enforceable by any person applying for, contemplating applying for, or opposing any annexation. I think the intent of the language, it's my understanding from information shared by Gina Dahl, is that, because the decision to annex can be discretionary, basically this language would kind of be an advisory that, look, you can meet the criteria and ultimately you may still not be annexed, or, there's no obligation to say yes. And I think that's what the intent of that language is. So, okay there. There are some additions as far as adding, numbers and subsections, totally good there. There was a recommendation that the density of 4 to 7 be removed and that there just be a reference to the growth policy. We're fine with that, but just wanna make it known that 4 to 7 is not expressly stated in the growth policy. There are some growth scenarios that you can derive that that's a supported range, but the only place that 4 to 7 is ever mentioned is in this policy itself. So yes, we can do that, but just know that there's not a range specified. So we kind of rely on like an extrapolation to get that.
So where would that best where would that best be at if it's, because I don't think it should be in here. Where do you think should it be in the group?
Well, I think with the adoption of Senate Bill 382, and I've really taken this informal thing, by the way, to heart because I haven't said council member in a while, so I apologize.
I like the little group like that. I just need coffee.
Yeah, I mean, no disrespect. But with the adoption of Senate Bill 382 and the type of analysis between the housing component as well as future land use map and having to account for the number of housing units you need, I think we're gonna get that data in our growth policy update. So I think we can live without an expressed range in the interim.
Yeah, and I'd agree. I think I mentioned this in the response that Monica's going through here with the questions you had. I think that, and she already pointed out, obviously it's not called out in there. I think it's important to note, and we had this conversation 7 years ago probably, where we proposed a higher density number in the annexation policy, and the council ended up deciding to keep it at 4 to 7. 4 to 7 is not getting you where you would go for, transit supported, the cost of service area. And I think we're gonna hear more about that with the cost of service. You're at the bottom end of that. So absolutely, to her point, when we analyze this with what we have to do for housing and we look at what's needed and whatnot, I think we're gonna see that. And really the new zoning is moving you in that direction already, so.
So Councilmember Robson, unless you have something more to say, Monica.
Let's see, one additional amendment. And so that would be on page 3 of 7, it would be number 6, and it's in the rationale portion. And it would basically be, and I think along the same lines of understanding what costs are related to the development, but when we're going through, what is our capacity to serve? Is it consistent with the growth policy? What are the impacts on existing residents? There is also an addition recommended to say that the committee should document and consider recommended or potential developer contributions to be made in kind or cash to help defray city cost, mitigate impacts, or otherwise provide compensation or financial assistance relating to the proposed annexation. So I think it's just in the same vein of what we've already discussed, but asking the committee to actually spend some time with the map amendment saying these are potential costs that we see coming down the pipeline that then maybe we can reference at the time of annexation. I will say I wouldn't expect this to be, some sort of super detailed list. I mean, obviously, when we're talking about requests that are big, we don't even know really what the costs are at this point in time. So I wouldn't put too much expectation on that and seeing some sort of itemized breakdown, but it does at least push us to be thinking towards known things. For instance, lift station, pressure station, is there something that needs to be done there that would be proportionate to their development? I think we would see things more along that line. So with that, we also don't have any problem with that language either in the policy. So with that, sure, I'm done.
Councilman Repsis, you had a question.
So I guess we know the cost of services study is coming. Is this going to be our last bite at the annexation policy for a couple years, or do we think that once we get that study, we're going to reopen this again and try to incorporate the things that we learn out of that study into this annexation policy? So, meaning then I can hold off on some of the stuff I want to say for 6 months while we wait for that study to come back.
Yeah, Councilmember Repsis, absolutely, this is not your one and only opportunity to influence the annexation policy. I think absolutely the cost of services study is going to inform and actually provide much better information than we have right now to take a pencil to this. I think also waiting for that study to be done, I don't want to sound too crazy right now, but between, 2 neighborhood plans, a land use study for the inner belt loop, updating the growth policy, updating subregs and zoning regs, we need better information to inform it, and we need to work that into the plan, so of juggling those projects.
So for right now, we should just focus on changes to how we're managing the map, and we might come back and after that study is done and talk more generally about our annexation process.
That would be my recommendation.
Yeah, I would agree
I can live
at this
with that.
point,
Thanks.
yeah.
That $200,000 isn't enough to
Oh,
cover everything.
It's amazing, but it's also a really amazing responsibility to initiate, 4 plans of that nature and get them through the process.
Any further questions? Councilman Shariki?
So a follow-up to that, what are we actually getting in that study? Is it gonna be basically a snapshot of what the cost of services is in the year 2023? Does it move us towards the ability to do that ourselves?
So, and I don't know, I know Councilmember Gulick's been involved in this as well, and we're actually just working with the consultants to start providing them, they did a document request for all sorts of financials and infrastructure and growth policy and a whole bunch of things. The way that scope is set up is you're actually looking at looking at a time horizon, but also you're first assessing, okay, what is all the how is the city operating now? What are the financials? What are the costs of providing services? Do we have performance standards now? Do we have things that we're trying to meet? Are we meeting them or are we not? Staffing levels, it's collecting all that and then taking that and looking at scenarios with development in terms of how are we developing now and what would be, development, types or scenarios where then you're seeing a balance in the costs of the services versus the impacts, what's required to deliver the services. So it's gonna be set up like a model where afterwards it's developed, you can then continue to use it and you can update it based on changes and information that's fed into that regarding the city's financial situation and stuff. So it's not gonna be a one-time, now we're in 2030 and we're still looking back at 2022, you're gonna take that and then work with it and then update it as you go. I mean, be able to update it as you go. So, and we should have more, we just had a call with their team just last week for this document request, and it was a 2-page, they've got a ton of things they're interested in. We're trying to sift through that. But I would imagine here, after they get a little further along, we'll have a better way of, be able to share that more with you all in terms of how that's gonna work. But yeah, it's not just a one-time deal, it's gonna be a dynamic.
I think the hope is that there's like metrics and measures that can be referred to in various scenarios, and one of them would be in our land use decisions. So I mean, I think that type of information would be so critical to any updates to the policy in the future, in a really positive way. Absolutely.
Since we can't do any formal action on the work session, when will this information come back for a vote then?
So this is scheduled to come to you on your August 14th meeting, which is your next, meeting after, I guess, because we're at work session now, and then you've got one meeting. Yeah, so it'd be your August 14th regular council meeting. It's on the agenda right now, and we're gonna have this tonight and then make final adjustments to the memos and such.
So have you gained any information from this evening to help in that decision making on the 14th?
I mean, yeah, I think I've made a bunch of notes, but I mean, I feel like we're hearing generally positive in terms of moving forward and bringing you the recommendations that we've talked about tonight. And I think with the draft, with the policy edits, that we would bring those as well.
Right.
And obviously we have a few council members missing. We'll wanna check with them to see if there's anything that, that they're thinking about that we haven't heard.
I would say, if I could just add, I mean, one of the specific things that I heard a council member voice that they would like more information or to be able to see is the relation of the functional classification map to the areas. Definitely, we've talked about amendments that the mayor and councilmember Neese offered up to the policy. I would say shy of that, and I think it's important because we have Taylor and Doug and Craig and Aaron in the room, is that I didn't hear anything tonight that suggests that there is some sort of crazy need for additional information in order for you to be able to make a determination on August 14th. I'm not hearing that, and I just want to kind of affirm that.
And the mayor did call me and say he liked the red lines, he liked the information. Councilman Neese was next, and then Councilman Sariki.
Okay, so going back to the question that I was trying to ask.
Groundwater.
And the reason I'm asking this is that on page 2, I think it is, when you've got that page 3, you've got that long list of things that you have considered. You say geology and topography and soils. In my mind, that doesn't include groundwater.
It doesn't in our mind either.
Okay.
Yes, and I'll tell you why. When we're
It's a big rabbit.
It is. It's a big thing, and quite frankly, it's not something that we have the expertise in-house at the city to even, begin to regulate. So what we do is we rely on, at the time of approvals, whether it be in the city or the county, we're relying on DNRC. DNRC is responsible for water quantity, meaning, new subdivisions that are happening out at the county that want to use wells, they're responsible for making the determination of, is the water there and is the water available? The DEQ, on the other hand, is responsible for quality. Is the water that's there of a quality that can be used? What are you doing to maintain quality? So we rely on their determinations and their approvals to handle the water situation. In addition to that, we are aware of, it does come up with our planning board when we discuss things. The Department of Mines, Minerals and Energy is doing the West End groundwater study. They have additional funding for monitoring and data collection. We are in contact with them at several points throughout the year, trying to better understand what their findings are. But as far as us being the regulators of groundwater, we are not.
So, which is fine, I'm not expecting that. What I am wanting to make sure is that I mean, if I look at these two different annexation proposals that are on there, they're probably a little bit more like each other in terms of groundwater than I would expect, except for the fact that I would expect a lot less water up on top of the bench. And if something that's like closer down to the river in more drylands, swampy areas, I would expect that to be different. So given the information you're getting from those two state departments, do we make different determinations in terms of density and what can go in? And this is a question both city and county.
I mean, I would say that's hard to answer, and it's kind of complicated and convoluted. There's a lot of preference that is given to the developer in order for them to be able to apply for what they want to apply for. We rely in the county. Every application says, you have to have your subdivision approval through the state agency, and however you prepare to do that. So that's how the county handles it, is by saying we're gonna rely on the state's determination. In the city, certainly, I mean, I think if we're staring down the barrel of a widespread environmental issue, we're going to make that known. We've had several staff reports even that go to the county and say, this is in close proximity. We have the ability to serve at the city. Commissioners, you need to understand that. The 48th and Central Development, perfect example if you go back and read that staff report. So we are trying to call attention to it in what ways we can.
So it's past our 7:30 usual time for a break.
Let's wrap it up.
Let's wrap it up. Any other dramatic questions for Monica or Wyatt before we move on?
I do have another question, if you don't mind. It's actually about the map, Monica. Why I really liked what you're doing here with the map, the 3 different zones, but I'm wondering if, because the red is like you say, stop, but there's a lot of development like between Sweetgrass and the other green area there that says go. I thought I heard the developer say there's a lot of tracks already developed in there, so wouldn't that, you can kind of see a lot of the shadows over the streets, wouldn't we want to tag that all red?
We chose not to, because the way that we were looking at potential for redevelopment is different than probably how, someone who's looking for more raw type land would classify it. The reality is that they are, larger parcels, and they can, yes, right now it may be one dwelling on 5 acres, but the reality is there is absolute possibility to further develop in the future. Now, if those parcels were developed like Daybreak or some of the other subdivisions that we've put in the red area, we would have made it red. But the opportunity for further subdivision within subdivisions is very limited, whereas on those, there is opportunity. It just takes the right situation.
Okay, thank you.
So why don't we have public comment on number 2 before we move in? Is there anybody that would like to talk about what we've just been talking about? Come up here and you have 3 minutes to give us your name and your address.
I won't take 3 minutes because I know you want to go home, and so do I. But I think the amendments are great. I too had the question of, well, I know there's pieces that aren't red that should be red because they're not going to get developed anytime soon. So I mean, Monica's right that they're 5-acre tract. So I don't know if there's another distinction or just a general awareness that as you're looking at this map, I mean, the idea is to look at this and go, well, yes, that's not infill, but it is infill because there's nothing between A and B that's going to get filled in. And if you have just a general understanding that when there's 5-acre tracts in there, that yes, could chop into smaller pieces. I mean, not likely in the real recent, but definitely could. I mean, some guy could say, I'm going to sell and chop it into tiny pieces, and they could do that for sure. So I don't know if there needs to be another distinction there or not. But in general, I think these amendments are very good. The question was asked, would Sweetgrass Meadows and this property at Dover Ranch, should they have been something that the city would have pushed quicker than the annual thing? And Monica didn't want to say, probably because I was sitting there, that no, they should have gone on the annual thing. And I think they probably should have. Gone on. I mean, they're a big piece that we're trying to amend a large map. I get that. Now, if I'd have been asking for the corner of 70th and Rimrock, and I've got that 20 acres right there that I could develop as county or city, to be able for the staff to be able to go to you guys and say they really want to do this as city, maybe county if you don't want it. That piece should go to the city in my mind, and so that I think is an instance where they should be able to fast track something small like that. But these bigger tracts of land, Wyeth is right. There's a ton of staff time involved in presenting to you good information, so you know whether or not to bring them to amend the map for them. I think for big tracts that makes good sense, but the ability to take that small piece of land, that little chunk on Central, and turn that process around is huge for improving development in the city. I'll go unless you have questions.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Almost 3 minutes, I apologize.
Is there anything on the internet? Okay. So we close the public comment. Anything else for Wyatt and Monica, Councilman Reps?
Yeah, if I could, thanks. I guess the thing I'm struggling with right now is if we want to take and put things into the green, then that should give the developer some expectation that it will be a predictable path through to annexation and then eventual development, right? I'm not so sure. I'm like, if Doug were to come back in 3 weeks after we approve the green section here on the 14th, and he comes back on the 21st and say, we're ready to do an annexation now. I'm not sure I'm ready to head on that immediately until we get the cost of services study. And I think we need to incorporate those things into it and have some expectation that, we're going to get hopefully a bit more analytical about our annexation decisions. But I don't think we're quite there yet. We've got some really good information coming relatively quickly. And I'd hate to kind of rush, and I know it wouldn't appear to him like we're rushing, but when we've got that coming in the next couple months, and we've got these parcels way out on the edges, and I get the benefits with them being connected and those types of things, but I just wonder about how we set that expectation that green doesn't mean it's we're ready to annex right away. We need to have more information. I might not be expressing that very well, but I don't want to give the impression that I'm ready to say that, yeah, we're ready to annex these properties without the additional information that's coming pretty soon. I don't know what that is.
On that? So
I would say, I think the concern there was just trying to figure, there has to be a transition point, which is, I get what you're saying in terms of we get the information that we're gonna get, and then we start to apply it, into the different areas, I think, or, processes. But I guess what you're basically saying is we would, like a moratorium, we would say, okay, we're not gonna do any more annexations until we get this information in in certain areas. Maybe, I'm not quite sure if you're talking about everywhere, but if you're, that's a concern only because, yeah, we have the process in place. We don't have that information yet, and we're working off of what we have now. And when we get it, we would make adjustments. And I would say a couple months is probably not how quickly we're gonna get the information. So, in speaking of speed, that's gonna be longer. So I think that's the concern is like, wait, what are we doing then? We're gonna sort of stop, or we're gonna stop on certain ones if we were to get a petition, which obviously we don't know. And then what does that mean? So I think, again, back to the sort of consistency of like processes and knowing when do we make that switch would be a concern for me about that, about how you're doing that and waiting. Because there's lots of things we're doing analysis on that we, how do we make that determination? So anyway, we would be concerned about that.
Couple more people, Councilman Goulet?
I think my response also to your question would be is I see a cost of services study influencing not merely whether we annex, but what type of development occurs within it, or even at what rates, I guess, what kind of property tax structure or things like that. Just making sure that we allow for a variety of types of development, but we make sure that that development, the properties, the taxes pay for the services that are provided. So, I think I think annexation is not the only thing, I guess. It will be really important for me, and it would take a long time for that to build out, I guess, a long time before we would see things being brought forward, specific site developments and what coming forward.
But we do that concurrently now, with our planned neighborhood developments, we do annexation and zoning kind of concurrently, so
But this
we've
isn't,
gotta have all that information.
but this isn't the actual annexation itself, but this is the annexation map that we're saying here.
And if I may, I mean, the reality is, you know, based on the decision that you make on the 14th, whether it's, yes, we want to move you into zone 1 or the red area, whichever you keep it as, or not, the developer is gonna take that information and they are going to proceed. Like they are already ready to proceed, so that either means they're gonna start master planning and going forward in that effort. You know, in no way has either one of these developers expressed that they would be coming to the city in one foul swoop with one giant annexation. That being said though, decisions are cumulative. And the development community needs for your decisions to be cumulative. So I think it's really hard to have it both ways, Councilmember Rupsis. I think that that's the best case scenario for you, is to be able to know all of the pieces so you feel good about your decision. But the reality is that it's really either yes or no, so that those developers can take that decision and move forward accordingly. I think there will be hesitation on their part if they feel like there's an opportunity to kind of rescind your perceived approval.
Councilman Shuffle.
Yeah, thank you, Deputy Mayor Boyette. Yeah, you should see what happens with the economics of land prices if you have a moratorium. Holy smokes. Cities that have done that, who have said, we are not going to annex any more property, really mess with the economics of development. Because suddenly, everybody's land prices got really, really high because they were able to annex, or they had properties that couldn't be annexed. It has economic impacts. Anything that comes close to a decision like that has economic impacts that I don't think anybody of the 11 of us have any idea how to even calculate. That would send a really, really strong message that could be really disastrous for what we're trying to achieve. And I understand that there are council members who have felt like they've waited some time for a cost of study service, but I can tell you I've waited just a little bit longer. And things do happen. Things happen that are making our decision-making process better and better and better over time. I can see that. I feel that, and I think that we're absolutely moving in the right direction. Are we getting there as fast as we could? I don't know. Are we getting there as fast as we'd like? Maybe not. But intentional movement towards a goal is always the best thing, even though it may not be as fast as would be preferred by some. But we're moving in the right direction. I love this discussion compared to 2018. I can remember back to 2018. I like these discussions much better. That we're I think there's a lot of thoughtfulness in what council is trying to communicate about the way we'd like the city to be planned. So I think we're moving in the right direction. It might not be as fast, but you know, the tortoise did win the race. So thank you.
Well, I'd like to close number 2 and move on to number 3, if everybody's okay with that. Kevin?
Yep, very briefly, so Unified Work Program is on for the next work session, so we do have back-to-back work sessions along with the charter review talk. Have a resolution ready for that, so we can start talking about that. And then Councilmember Rupsis' parking rec work session for that to discuss.
Any questions for Kevin then? Public comment on what Kevin just said. Council, general council discussion, anything that we'd like to talk about? How about public comment on anything else? Anybody wants to come forward and just talk? Okay.
Can I just follow up on?
Yes,
some
sir,
of the
go right
conversation?
ahead. Speak up so we can hear you.
Yes, thank you, council. So I would just like to weigh in on the discussion as far as, moratorium or whatnot. If these properties were brought into the green or red zone, just to hit on the point that there are real carrying costs for people who own land and are waiting for these applications to go through. And so, as Monica referenced, like, just because something is moved into the green, if there's a moratorium or whatnot on approval of an annexation until the cost of service study comes out, or that's kind of why the policy is updated, those costs and services are going to start flipping that balance between being able to do a higher density development within the city versus going into the county with a less dense development. The more that those carrying costs add up without a decision being made, the more likely it is that that decision is going to get flipped. It will be developed in the county. So I would just like to add that to the discussion as far as what the impacts of the change in that would be. Appreciate everybody's time.
Thank you. Anyone else? Anything else, people? We're adjourned.